Everyone. Hope and pray you have been keeping well and wish you the best for your online learning. Hope you have now used to it and you will cope with it very well. All right, today I propose to discuss with you George Herbert's Collar. First, I will discuss Collar and then the other poem, that's Jordan. All right, Herbert, again a metaphysical poet. So, a metaphysical poet with all the features of metaphysical poetry, that's argumentative style, imagery, but with the difference that this metaphysical poetry is what we call confessional, devotional, deeply religious, Christian discourse. Both Herbert and Croshaw, their poems which are prescribed for you, and most of their poems, they are in the biblical tradition. All the metaphysical poets, they have this trait or this streak of devotional poetry, but in Donne you had poems which are love poems. So that's the big difference. Here is the metaphysical poet with all the features of metaphysical poetry, but the focus is on devotional poetry, God-man relationship, innermost feelings, something similar to what we did in the sonnet, Donne's devotional sonnet, so almost along the same lines. First, we will take up Collar. The very title Collar has theological overtones, not to be taken as an ordinary collar, that's particular collar worn by the clergy, symbolic of their bond or their bondage to God. They are tied to the service to God. So the title itself says something. What is more important is it is about the inner conflict, the struggle, a kind of rebellion. He's the poet or the narrator, he's a clergyman, he's spent his whole life in it, but at some point in his life, he feels the frustration, kind of rebellion. He wants an escape from his religious life and to attain freedom. So this climax, and we'll note there is anti-climax as well, it's there. So be mentally ready for this struggle, inner conflict. That's the striking feature of the poem. I was just pointing out to you the features of metaphysical poetry are very much there. First, the dramatic opening. We'll just see the text. Look, it starts abruptly, dramatic, full of action. Then there is argumentative approach. One point is made, developed, refuted, modified, justified, totally analytical or argumentative approach. And then there is concrete imagery. Imagery is remarkable in this poem, but more pronounced and distinct in this other poem, that's Jordan. So I was telling you it is about the struggle to maintain faith in God. No matter how devout and deeply religious you may be, at some point you have this doubt, skepticism. It is part of faith. The more doubts you have, the more conviction you gain. So it is that mental state where he feels the struggle, so a kind of rebellion. He's feeling under some restrictive pressure. Collar is the same symbolic of the same restrictive pressure. He feels so. That is a struggle within his own soul. The poem narrates that, and it is in the form of arguments, and he wants to bare his soul. he expresses his innermost thoughts, and that's why the whole account is so convincing, so persuasive. And as I was telling you, there is an element of drama, not just the dramatic, abrupt opening, drama in terms of self-pity. He says that his only harvest has been thorn, the bleeding, and with thorn, the natural association of bleeding. So that's feeling of anguish, it is there. So there is lamentation in stanza 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth stanza is very significant from the point of view of this conflict. But what is most remarkable is the fifth stanza, the final stanza, where there is anticlimax. But in all these 3, 4 stanzas, you find some kind of aggression, but the fifth stanza is in the form of what we say anticlimax. So the poem is about a dialogue between a single speaker with 2 inner voices. Yes, Herbert is anticipating dramatic monologue. 2 voices, what you note in Victorian poetry and later in T.S. Eliot, the 2 voices, well, you may call it the public voice and the private voice, or the interior monologue, dramatic monologue, or even interior monologue. The features of they are there. So you feel, reading the poem, you feel on the one hand is the heart, and on the other is the will. And here is the will, the poet's self, which rebels against God, and against what? Rebelling against what? Against the collar. Collar, which is the yoke, which is the bondage symbol of religion. Ultimately, it is the heart which wins the battle, and he finds love of God, and he is reconciled to that. So the poem is about rebellion against God and at the ultimate return. This is what man's story is, and that's what devotional poetry is about. So be mentally ready for these points when you do the text. Now very quickly, I will draw your attention to some of the main features of the text where you have to pay more attention. In the first stanza, broadly speaking, lines 1 to 9, the opening line, and that's what I was telling you, the drama. No more. Yes, that's frustration. Enough is enough. He is no more happy with this bondage, this restriction, this oppression. And look in the fourth line, the repetition of the word free, and then next line loose, then large, and that's what is his frustration. He wants to be free. He wants to be loose, away from the restrictions. And then, as I was telling you, it is about the self-pity as well. Look here, have I no harvest but a thorn to let me blood and not restore what I have lost, the cordial fruit. He doesn't have any fruit. In terms of harvest, he has only thorn, and that's his misery, that's his agony. Now look at the second stanza, that's line 10 to 18. In the opening line of the stanza, that's line 10, wine. Well, that's purely biblical allusion. The Last Supper and this wine had by Jesus. More important here is, as you can see in the lines 14, 15, 16, questions. He's raising question. Lost to me, no flowers, no garlands, all blasted, all wasted. He's raising questions reflective of his agony, his rebellion, his protest, his anguish. Not so my heart, but still there is fruit, and thou hast hands. Fruits and hands, they are also significant. What pains him, what fills his heart with bitterness is he doesn't have any fruit. Everything has gone to waste. And this note of self-pity continues in the third stanza, that's line 19 to 28, and you can see in line number 21, cage, and now link it with collar, and then rope of sands. That's what binds him. These are the shackles. Sorry, rope, collar, and then cage. He is lost in his petty thoughts. Next line, petty thoughts. Another symbol of this enslavement of our subservience is this cable, bound. Bondage, the idea of bondage is there. And in the next stanza, that's fourth stanza, lines 29 to, the last stanza, lines 29 to 36. The note of complaint goes on, and almost at the fag end of the poem, line 35, line 35, methought I heard one calling child. That's the anticlimax. So far, there was complaint, protest, description of the ordeal, and here is a loving, affectionate, concerned voice, and the voice is from no one other than God. God-man relationship. The poet or man is like child in the eyes of God, full of love, care, concern. So his complaint that has been reciprocated, he has listened to it, and the just one word child, but there is a note of chastisement. He is being admonished, chided for so much complaint, and but he is brought back to the religious fold, and that's what I told you. It is about God-man relationship. The voice calls him, addresses him as child, and look here, look at the reply, this note of same note of submission, replied, my Lord, returning to the fold of religion. So all the agitated speech, everything has this calming, balming effect, restoration to the source of all power and perfection, that's God. So as you can see here, at one level, it is something very deeply psychological, personal, the note of complaint and frustration, anguish, but ultimately, finally, eventually, he finds refuge, peace in God, and as a child, just as a child, he feels let down, offended for the time being, for the moment, but his ultimate source of strength is that fatherly figure, and in this case, that's of God. So it is a spiritual journey, starting with this note of doubt and disillusionment, and he's laying bare his soul, all things which haunt him, with a sense of frustration. But ultimately, he discovers the meaning of life, and he returns to the affectionate God. So, in the best tradition of religious devotional poetry about God-man relationship, God as the protector, as patron, as father, that's what the poem is about. Okay? Thank you very much.